Hello, everyone. I am Myckayla, and I am a registered social service worker and psychotherapist here at Health Counseling and Therapy.
Hi, I am Lindsey, and I am also a psychotherapist here at Health Counseling. We operate out of Ontario, Canada. So welcome to the Health Counseling Show. So we do have a little disclaimer before we kick this off. So the content discussed in this show is for educational purposes and is not for a substitute for care from a registered health professional. Please keep in mind that while we are psychotherapists, our conversations in the show are not meant to suggest best practices. The podcast is about discussing important topics that affect the lives of everyday people, not to provide advice. If you do need assistance, contact a mental health professional or other health professional. If you need any suggestions, check out our health information on our website. And with that, we'll kick this episode off. So today we'll be discussing issues related to connection in our community.
It's going to be a good one.
It will. Okay, so to start off, we have a few questions. Our first one is, how do you find community in spaces that respect identity? And what are some green flags to look out for? And what are some of the red flags?
Okay. So specifically with this one, I find that my go-to and what I do tend to suggest to clients as well when it comes to like finding community and really trying to connect with like pieces of ourselves is really being introspective and looking at like what does matter to you? Like what is a big piece of your identity? Is it sports, right? As I was saying at the beginning, like this weekend I played a ton of volleyball. So if it is being part of like a co-ed volleyball league and being able to be outdoor or indoor, are there different places where I can express those pieces of my identity in like a open and safe environment? Of course, we can't make sure that every space that we enter, regardless of how we're entering it, is going to hit all of those marks for us. But that's usually a go-to for me. And specifically with like finding that community, it is like going in with almost not trepidation, but like going in carefully and subtly. I find like you're not going to walk into a space and be like, this is my name and this is my entire backstory and everything that I've lived through my entire life and throw everything at people. Be selective about what you're sharing in different spaces, especially when you're out in the community, until you can build that trust and relationships. That's usually like my go-to with that.
Like it. So I would kind of like add on to that piece. So like when you're going into space, kind of being open to what that possibility can be. Because I know like sometimes going into like a new space or joining a new team can sometimes be a little bit scary, particularly for individuals that get a lot of social anxiety, but just kind of being open for that possibility of what this could be for you. And really kind of tapping into where are your interests? What do you want to get out of this experience? And letting that kind of like lead you as you're starting a conversation. Because often like if you're starting a new place too, like whether it's like joining a sports team, you automatically have something in common.
Yeah.
So you can even kick it off with that familiar piece of like, hey, like, have you done this before? You know, how does this kind of work? Even just to kind of like branch into a conversation and then kind of go from there.
Yeah.
I'm also a big proponent of, you know, when you're in new spaces too, being attuned to, do you feel like you can bring your true authentic self in that space? Or are you feeling like you got to like show up as somebody else and have another persona? Because I think that too, as far as like those green flag, red flags pieces, like that's what comes to mind. Like if you're feeling like, hey, who I am isn't really accepted, that might be a bit of a yellow flag and kind of checking in with that. Like,
definitely,
what's going on? Right?
Yeah.
And And too, like, how are people responding? Is there like smiley faces, or is other individuals that like identify in the same way that you do? And again, kind of like gauging that acceptance and that welcoming when it comes to identity and finding community and what that means to you.
I definitely agree with that, like green, almost yellow flag too, that you brought up there. Making sure that you're comfortable in a space. And obviously there's going to be moments of discomfort when you're meeting new people, when you're doing new things. And that is just, it is a part of like being a human being. We like to know, we like to be certain. And so going into uncertainty is always going to feel uncomfortable, but paying attention to like, do I feel a manageable level of discomfort here? Or am I like really at my max? Am I really at my limit? Right? Paying attention to that as a green versus yellow, red flag. And then some more obvious red flags, like myself, I identify as a Black woman. So if I walk into a space that I see slurs or hate messages, like that is not going to be a space that I'm going to return to. I'm going to make sure that I am aware of that and I protect my own well-being, to not enter a space where I'm going to be feeling any kind of resistance or discrimination when it comes to pieces of my identity. And that is like a big red flag that I will look out for, which is unfortunate. That is something that we have to look out for, but it's part of taking care of me and my own mental well-being. So,
and I feel like that should just be like a big red flag for like everybody.
For everybody, yeah.
Like,
regardless of what your identity is.
Yeah, if there's some clear indications that like certain identities are not welcome,
yeah,
you know, that might be an indicator of something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry, my thingy. There we go. Now we're all back. Do you have anything else you want to add to that question then?
As far as that kind of goes, you know, being really kind of clear and honest with yourself when it comes to like community. And like when you think of community, what comes to mind? What does that involve? What do you want to have in that experience? So as a way almost to kind of like sort through what feels right to you. And I know you mentioned earlier too, like the pieces of like, what does it mean to you, right? Like, and what kind of value do you want to get out of this? Because this is your time, and like your energy is worth a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that, again, when we think about identity, there's so many different pieces to how people identify. So if you are a young professional and you're looking for something related to that, okay, that's the identity piece that you might be like focusing on when you're thinking about community. If it is a racial identity or a sexual identity or a gender identity, right? Like be really mindful about what you're looking for and intentionally building supports around that versus going into a space and being like, I'm hoping for the best. When we can be really intentional with our actions, it tends to work out a little better for us in the long run.
Right? Definitely.
All right. So question number 2 on our list is, I just moved to town and I'm finding it hard to find friends. What are some suggestions on meeting new people? I grew up in the area. And then the second part to this is, I grew up in the area and I'm looking to broaden my social circle.
Right. So I think this is like, it's a big one for people. Making friends as an adult is tough on so many levels, right? Because you don't have that natural kind of built-in friendship construction as you do with school. Yeah. And like if you're going into like a workplace, yes, you can kind of build some friendships, but sometimes too, that's not necessarily enough, or it may not quite match with what kind of friendships you want as well.
Yeah.
So like with that being said too, again, kind of like tapping into the piece of like, you know, looking at your own personal interests and taking the opportunities to kind of step out of your comfort zone a little bit, to like invite people to things that do interest you. You know that there might be some of those common interests, and sticking with those plans.
Yes.
Right? Because like sometimes like the day of, we're like, I'm not sure if this is like something that feels good to me. But like trusting that initial instinct to make that plan, right? Unless if there's some like significant red flags that we talked about.
Yeah.
That's the exception. But otherwise, you know, holding yourself accountable to take that opportunity, because you never know what kind of friendships could like spur out of that. And like anytime you're meeting new people too, there's always like that awkward dance of
Oh, yeah.
like, okay, what do we talk about? But like both parties are probably in that same
Exactly.
situation.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody goes into like a new social situation knowing exactly how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. A big thing for me with this one is I usually suggest to people, again, pay attention to what is important to you. If you really, really enjoy art, maybe look for some evening art classes that happen once a week in the area that you're in. If you are, like myself, a trivia buff and you really enjoy trivia, take a look at some maybe local trivia games that are happening in the area. It can feel really uncomfortable, obviously, to go into these places alone. So if it is inviting a coworker, like you had mentioned, or a neighbor, or maybe you do have that one social connection, and just going the two of you, you don't need to have like a giant crew of people, which I think is another big thing when we think about adult relationships, especially if we're moving into new areas. There's this tendency to like want to have the big social circles that are seen on social media and blasted all over the place. I am a very, very, very big supporter of quality over quantity and making sure that the people that you are spending your time with are people that actually connect for you and do something for you as a human being, and not in like a let me use you as a human kind of thing, but a do you bring joy to my life? Do we have the same sense of humor? Do we have similar conversation topics that we can explore? Right. So some of those pieces, and really looking into like just local classes or events that you can pop into and see. Right. But like you mentioned, the big thing with adult friendships is friendships based on proximity. Right. Yeah. We aren't in school anymore. A lot of us as adults aren't in school anymore. So we're not in classrooms where you're with the same people or in the hallways with the same people all day, every day. And so it feels really uncomfortable to like be around a coworker and be like, hi, how is, because you're not forced into that situation anymore. Yeah. So it is also normalizing it. And it's tough as adults to try and find your crew, but it can happen. It does happen.
Yes, there's possibilities out there.
Exactly.
Oh, definitely. And I think too, like in that is if they're all people that you generally enjoy being around, like I mean, if it is like a colleague, then nurturing some of those relationships. If you're wanting more depth to them too, allow yourself to like kind of step into that a little bit more, right? Ask a little bit more questions, or like, share a little bit more about yourself if you're wanting to deepen that, because there's nothing wrong with like nurturing the relationships that you do have. Again, to your point, like that quality piece, right? Like, because we all need somebody.
100%.
So like, build that for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, on that point there, but we all need somebody. I truly believe that friendships can sometimes rival the importance of like romantic relationships, right? And how important they are in people's lives. I don't know where I would be without my girlfriends, honestly. They keep me sane. They keep me grounded. I need those friendships in my life. And so being able to increase that vulnerability with, again, people that we feel safe with. We don't want to just be popping into spaces and like given our whole life story to people, because that can be just a really extreme level of vulnerability. But once you start to build that baseline level of comfort or trust or safety, then starting to build and deepen that relationship by being a bit more vulnerable with like not just talking about the weather, but maybe something difficult that you're going through, or asking those more in-depth questions to people in your life too.
Yeah, and there could be a lot of like solid health benefits.
Yes.
To like having those like really good relationships with people, whether it be like that stress management piece of like being able to talk about a difficult time that you went through, or even like having somebody to go for a walk with and having like that activity buddy, if you will, right? And or just having just somebody knowing that they're there and allowing people to show up for you, especially for individuals who may have had difficulty having people show up for them in the way that they want to, right? Opening that opportunity for yourself, and then also reciprocating that too for people. Like, it's such a good thing.
It is. It really, really is. on that point about like the health benefits, I saw a piece of research recently that said women actually tend to live longer because of the social relationships that we tend to create, right? A lot of men, and I see it even in my own personal life, men, once they hit their like 40s, 50s, they're like, well, I guess I'm just like a dad now, or I'm just going to work for the rest of my life. And they lose a lot of those social connections, whereas women tend to stay a lot more connected socially. And it has a lot of long-term health benefits, right? It reduces stress, it reduces heart issues and cholesterol issues and blood pressure issues and all these different things. So stay connected. That's the core message there.
Absolutely. All right, let's go to question number 3. So, something that brought up is recently going through a relationship ending, and the friend group was very much intertwined. So they shared a lot of the same friends. And so the person might be struggling with connecting with people moving forward as they feel that they no longer fit into that said friendship group that was. So kind of navigating both the relationship ending and the friendships and what happens with that piece.
So this is, I feel like, a 2-part question, because there is just a natural grief that comes with the loss of anything in our life. It doesn't just have to be the loss of life. The loss of a relationship, obviously there's going to be grief that goes along with a breakup, and breakups are tough. I don't know how this breakup went for this person, but like they're not easy to go through. So definitely make sure that you're taking care of yourself in that process. But the second part to this being that grief in the connections, right? That grief in the friendships that are being missed. If it was double dating that happened, or like all big group get-togethers and everybody doing things together, and then that shifts, right? Because of the relationship ending, that is a really, really difficult thing to explore and navigate, because like we've been saying, social connections are so important. I think a big piece with this would be to check in with where your emotional maturity level is at, and can you be around this person, right? Like, are you at a point where the relationship ended, you guys have been able to navigate what that looks like for each of you, and can you still spend time together? Right? In a platonic way, maybe. I would suggest keeping it platonic, just so that you don't lose those social connections. And if not, having, again, vulnerable conversations and being honest with the friends that you have had in your life about, like, I miss you, right? Or I miss being around you. Can we do something that might not be group oriented, but maybe a few of you get together, and it's probably going to look different, and practicing a bit of acceptance towards the fact that it's going to look different and the dynamics are going to be off, I think is a big piece. People really don't like change.
It's tough.
It is tough. So they want to hold on to that. It's like, well, that was so much fun. I want to go back to that point, or I remember that trip that we did. And it's like, of course, you can look back and, again, grieve those memories, grieve those experiences. But it's going to look different. Like, if you guys are no longer in that relationship, and if the future moves along and you get a new partner, or your ex gets a new partner, like, that is going to shift things again. So staying flexible in what that connection looks like, I think, is like a really big piece there.
Yeah, absolutely. And staying true to what brought you together and that friendship, right? Of, you know, if it's a matter of like joint interests, or like, you know, similar life experiences, how does that kind of like factor into what the friendship looks like moving forward, right? And what kind of friendship do you as an individual want?
Yeah.
As well, because you might want something totally different, because maybe you did things together that you really didn't like. It was more like your partner's interest. Yep. Okay, so how can you like switch that piece up maybe a little bit? And then also too, like on the other side, giving that friendship group to some time to process how they are wanting to also navigate this relationship, and how they're going to make that work too. Because with any relationship, there's always at least 2 parts to it, if not more, right? So kind of giving a bit of that space, and like you said, like grieving what was, because it's not going to be the same, as tough as that is, but also that opens up some possibilities of what could be.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I like that point that you made there of like, there's always multiple stories, right? It's, you know, this story, and then the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
Yes.
So again, staying flexible with that, because it's not just going to be the two of you adapting to the changes. It's going to be the whole friend group getting used to the changing dynamic. So allowing people their space too. Everyone's got emotions. Everyone's got feelings bubbling around and showing up. So just being patient with people. But like looking down at the question here, the specific piece on like feeling like you no longer fit into the group. Typically we aren't supposed to connect with everybody. Like there are 8 billion people on this planet. We are not meant to get along with every single one of them. But I'm sure that there is somebody or one person, at least in this group, that you felt some deeper level of connection with. And so reaching out to that person and, like you said, doing those smaller activities or shifting what that looks like and what can we do together that you enjoy, that it's not like your partner was dragging you around to, or like, oh, okay, I'll go to this kind of thing, right? Yeah. So I think that's a big piece. And again, feeling like you belong and fit in and connecting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. So our last question here is, actually here in Sarnia, our local schools have adjusted the approved use of phones in classrooms, which reduces student access to social media and connecting with peers virtually throughout the school day. What are some ways this may impact students both positively and negatively?
I'm not going to lie. I'm very curious as to how this one plays out. It becomes a new school year.
Yeah.
And I say that because I think there'll be an adjustment period, both from like the schools as well as the students, right? Because social media is such a core piece of connection.
Yes, especially with this generation, right?
Exactly, right? Yeah. So many things are like centered on that. And I was actually talking to a faculty member fairly recently about this topic in a separate conversation. But we were talking about like how even resources got shared so much over social media. And that was like a piece I never really thought about it in that way. Like as far as like for the faculty themselves, having resources to then share with the classroom too, right? So they are using that like social media for some of that connection and exploration piece. But even like for the students, I think about that piece of, taking away that element of connection and an adjustment and a grief process, like you mentioned earlier, right? Of like not being able to have that as accessible as it once was. Okay, so there might be a little bit of like a growth period.
A learning curve, right?
Yeah. That distractibility piece though too, right? Yeah. And like kind of what do I now do?
Yeah.
With this like energy or with this like time that I would otherwise have my phone. Like how do I navigate that? And so like having tools, having resources, having fidget items as well too, readily available, and coping skills.
Definitely.
Like that's where my mind that goes with this one.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a huge thing, especially with how dependent everybody became on social media over COVID, right? When we think about, like when I hear this question, my brain immediately goes to high school students, right? Because I'm going to assume that most elementary students don't have devices with like open internet access. And if they do, that's probably a conversation to have with your little one, just with the risk. But I'm thinking like high school age students who are, texting or Snapchatting or Instagram messaging. No high school students use Facebook anymore. So just FYI for everybody out there, it's no longer cool. But the negative impacts of like, again, that disconnection from their peers, right? If they're not being able to text or connect with the people that they have built relationships with, can feel very unsettling and very uncomfortable in the classroom. It raises tensions and stress levels, and maybe kids are going to be snapping more or shutting down more in classrooms. We don't necessarily know what that's going to look like, but I don't think that's permanent, right? It's that learning curve of, okay, we no longer have that device, but many generations before didn't have devices, right? We had to engage with each other in a physical space, person to person. And so I think positively it will be a bit of a push in that direction for students to like actually connect with the person that's sitting next to them or in front of them or behind them that might not fall into their like status quo friendships, where they can be exposed to different perspectives or different identities, different points of view, right? And it will take some time to get there. But like you said, the fidgets or teachers being really intentional with how they create the classroom space, right? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be a bunch of students facing each other and being forced to look at each other with this like lack of device barrier? Or are they all going to be just like facing the classroom? Are they going to be facing different walls, right? And paying attention to how the physical space can impact the students in the classroom. 100%. But I do think that there's going to be some positives and negatives. I am hopeful that it overall will be a positive shift for students, though, because it's a big disconnection to be in a physical space with somebody and have them like looking at a device the whole time, right? Mm-hmm. Or when you're trying to tell a story and all you get is the scrolling and the yep, cool, okay. Like that is such a breakdown in a relationship. So I think that removing it from the classrooms will force students to practice a bit of those soft skills that they desperately need.
Yeah. Well, like that basic like communication skills, right? Like how do you start a conversation? How do you continue on like navigating conversations? And what does that look like? And being attuned to all the nonverbals that happen in a conversation too, right? Because like when you're on your phone and like typing something out, you lose so much of that. And just being able to like practice that attunement to it, I think could potentially be a big area that would like this comes into play. Yeah, I think. And then also too, like that element of tolerance for like social interactions and navigating that and building in one's own ability to cope and manage with, this feels like really uncomfortable. Okay. Like where am I noticing that at? Right? How can I navigate through this situation and assert what I want or what I need? If it's some extra school help on a project or whatever it might be, right? Like those are the pieces too that I think that by taking away some of the opportunities to access devices, that's where you can really do a lot of this like solid core life skill kind of work. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, so then when they go and pursue like post-secondary education or go into the workforce or even just like summer break. Yeah. Like carrying on
summer jobs, right?
Exactly. Yes. Like there is like some of these like really good opportunities to like practice these skills in a supportive environment too.
Yeah. And right? I think that's the big piece is that supportive environment. Like we talked about with the previous questions, it's finding discomfort without being forced into like overwhelming discomfort. Yeah. Right? So in a supportive environment, like a classroom, like we would hope that most classrooms are supportive and teachers are there to support the well-being of their students. Testing those discomforts, right? And being able to grow those skills right there in the classroom. I think that's huge. Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's show. To check out the show notes, visit healthcounseling.ca. If you have any questions you'd like us to address on our next episode, please reach out to us on Instagram at Health Counseling and Therapy or via the contact page at healthcounseling.ca. We'd love to hear about the important questions you have about your life and look forward to chatting with you. If you're looking for a therapist, feel free to visit healthcounseling.ca to check out our therapist profiles. The directory Psychology Today is also I'm going to try that one again. The directory Psychology Today also has great resources for finding a therapist. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, take care.